Welcome to Black and Psych, and thank you for coming to our event today. Who is Black and Psych? Black and Psych is a platform to promote visibility, community, and networking opportunities between Black professionals and trainees across the field of psychology. We seek to celebrate, amplify, and support Black voices in psychology and to encourage dialogue around the intersections of psychology, race, social justice, and equity. What we are here for. The Black and Psych organization is founded to one, promote the visibility of Black professionals and trainees in the field of psychology, two, create a community and network of established and aspiring Black psychologists for connection and future collaboration, and three, encourage and hold a space for dialogue around the intersections of psychology, race, social justice, and equity. Who we are here for. Black and Psych is founded to promote visibility, community, and networking opportunities between Black professionals and trainees across the field of psychology, inclusive of all intersectional identities. This is Black and Psych's current team, and you're currently hearing from the current president, Lauren Kendall Brooks. If you're interested in joining our team, please send an email to blackandspsych@gmail.com, visit our website at blackandspsych.org, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram. Also, the QR code listed on the right side of your screen will also take you directly to our website. Thank you, and I hope you would really enjoy today's seminar.
You all. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. This is one of the talks for Black in Psych Society, the organization. We're an organization that offers a platform for scientists and psychology from the Black community to make it as inclusive as possible to get all this professional development, resources, and a community for people to interact with each other. It's aimed to trainees, but like that means in any stage of academic and non-academic in terms of the psychological field. But thank you so much, Lisa, for being here today. It's the last talk on communicating science, a wonderful skill that a lot of us really need and we don't get when we're doing our training, and I wish more programs would. So I'm super excited for Lisa and Tammy for being here and just walking us through and how to share our science with people in a way that it's catching and it's a story that we can all follow, and we don't have to be experts in that specific topic to be able to get like the concept and the foundations of the conversation. So thank you so much. Yeah, let's just get it started.
All right, fantastic. Jocelyn, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. I think this is such an honor, and we're gonna have fun today. So my name is Lisa Cantrell. Also in here is Tammy Spence, Dr. Tammy Spence. So we are the two parts of Stories of Science, which is an institute that is our real mission is to support researchers in communicating their science. So we train folks how to share their own science. We also give them other kinds of multimedia support. And so we're going to have a fun time today teaching you how to take some of your own science and to tell it in a compelling and authentic way, in an ethical way, and to have fun while you're doing it. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so we can all take a look at each other. Fantastic. Okay, so we have probably at least 13-ish people. Let's do this first. We want to get to know each other because this is going to be a little bit of an interactive workshop. But I don't want people to freak out and be like, no, I just wanted to sit in and not do anything. There's only going to be 2 moments where we ask you to participate really, okay? So the first part is going to be an icebreaker that we're going to team you up with one other person just to get your tongue loosened up and feeling good and be like, all right, I met someone today. And then at the very end, we'll also ask you to pair up and share a story. But don't freak out. We're going to guide you seamlessly to that moment. So let's do this. Tammy Spence is going to put you into groups. Let's do groups of 3, Tammy, if we can, in case there's folks in a room that are like, I don't want to share. Maybe we'll at least have 2 people that want to share. When you go into the room, just introduce your name, just who you are. Tell them your pronouns if you feel comfortable doing that. Tell them your pronouns, what you study. So name, pronouns, what you study, and then fill in this blank. One true thing about me is. So I will model this. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, her. Technically, I study how infants see the world, infant visual perception. And one true thing about me is I used to have bangs. I have curly hair, but I used to have bangs that I would like straighten every day and like hairspray down. It was a terrible look. I did that for many years though. Okay. So y'all are gonna go in rooms and do that. And then we'll come back in here and then we'll start the workshop. Okay. Would you link people up, Tammy?
Sure.
Yes.
How long are we giving them?
Oh, let's just give them 2 minutes, real fast.
Ooh, okay, great. Here we go.
All right, we'll see y'all in 2 minutes. Go introduce yourselves. Okay. Did people actually get to go into a room and talk to a partner? Yes? Fantastic. Wonderful. So we like to get y'all in a room just kind of loosened up because really one of the things that we want to do in terms of communicating our science, we want people to be authentic. So I think oftentimes we come into academia and over the years, well, let me just ask y'all, how many of y'all are a first-year grad student? Let me see if you can do a reaction or you can drop it in the chat. I'm just curious, how many are second-year grad students? Third year. Okay, I see one person second year. Third year. How many are year 4 or beyond? You're like a postdoc or you're a professor or you've like well beyond it. Awesome. Okay. So more of us are like a little more seasoned. So you know that the longer you're in academia, kind of the more walls we start to build up because we've been in a lot of lab meetings, we've been in a lot of brown bags where oftentimes our science is criticized and we start to really try to not say anything wrong. What we want to do, one of the things that we want to do at Stories of Science, we want to help you communicate your science and to do a really good job of communicating solid research findings. Sorry, my cat's being bad. But we also want you to kind of revert back to where you were when you first started grad school, when you were like excited about what you were doing and you felt like it was okay to be really honest about what you were doing. That is the starting point, to be honest and authentic. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we go. And as I share my screen, I won't be able to see the chat. So I don't know if Tammy or Jocelyn can kind of keep tabs on the chat. If someone has a question, let me know. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Storytelling in science, the why and how. We're going to talk about why should we use stories, and then we're going to talk about how to do it. A little bit about me. I'm a developmental psychologist. So I got my PhD like over 10 years ago now, which makes me feel old. And I got it at Indiana University. I went in studying language, and as you all know, you like go in with this one idea of what you're going to study, but then I ultimately left with a dissertation in infant number. So I was looking at how infants understand quantity and number and amounts. I then went on and did my postdoc at UC Davis in California. And it was actually during that time that I started to get really interested in science communication. So what was happening is I was talking to a lot of people on the outside of psychology, and there are findings within psychology that all psychologists know about. And I'd be talking to just, a regular person on the street, and they'd never heard this finding. And I would be like, oh my God, there's all this interesting science, and there's this big gap where we're not telling people, we're not telling the public about it. And what's more, I would talk to science journalists who sometimes also didn't know about these findings. And so I was like, wow, even as scientists, we're not getting that message to science journalists, because the way it works is oftentimes the journalists come to us as scientists and they're like, what's cool, what's good? And then we don't do a great job maybe explaining to the journalists, so they can't communicate it to the public either. There's this gap. I think that as scientists, we need to get better at communicating our research to each other, communicating our research to journalists, communicating our research directly to the public. Okay. And that's what we're going to do here today. So I got really excited and interested in journalism. I actually then spent some time as a science journalist. I worked some for NPR as a freelancer. I worked for some other outlets communicating research to the public. And then now I work as an associate professor at Sacramento State. And I also work with Tammy at Stories of Science. And we also both work at Capital Storytelling, which that's a different organization. But if you're interested in it, ask us afterwards. It's a storytelling organization that's really about social change and true stories. But we're going to focus on science storytelling today. All right. Whew. So here we go. Stories are powerful. Hopefully, you're all here because you might believe that in some level. Hopefully, I don't have to convince you. If we can use stories to talk about our science, it can change how we understand each other's science and also how the public understands science. I'm going to give you some evidence for this. So, this is an interesting study. If we can all take a moment to remember what was going on in 2020, the pandemic, we went into lockdown. It was an extremely stressful time. Folks were passing away. It was an unbelievable, unprecedented moment, I think, in the history of the world, really. Then what happened is in December, we got a vaccine, if folks remember. And so early on, the vaccine was only for high priority folks. But by March or April of 2021, it was readily available to most people who wanted to get it. Now, we had just spent a year, devastated by this. People were dying. You would think that people would be rushing to get the vaccine, but I don't know if folks in this room remember, but by April, May, June, we started to realize that people were hesitant to get the vaccine, which I think for us in science feels crazy. Like, oh my God, why would you just not go get it? I had people in my family that were afraid to get it. Many of you here probably know of people who didn't get the vaccine or who were hesitant. There were lots of reasons people were hesitant. We could all probably name them, but there was some hesitance. Now, then there was a huge campaign. I don't know if you remember watching TV, and there'd be a campaign of like, go get vaccinated. Here's how it works. And we tried to have infomercials on like, here's how it actually works. It's through RNA, and here's what that means. Then there were other infomercials saying, here's how many people are dying and passing away. Here's how many people are getting, very, very sick. Here's how many people are getting sick if they're vaccinated. We tried to bombard the country with stats. That didn't seem to help either. These researchers that I'm sharing this paper from, they were curious at this time. They saw an opportunity to try to understand what would convince people to get vaccinated. And what they found was this. The people who were hesitant to get vaccinated, who then decided to get vaccinated, the thing that persuaded them was a story. And it was a true story. So they would report to the researchers, well, I decided finally to get vaccinated because a friend got COVID and they told me, personally, here's how terrible it was. Here's what happened to me. Or, a friend would say, my father got COVID and he passed away, or my father got COVID and he was in the hospital and here's how horrible that was. It was the true stories that then convinced and persuaded people to go and get vaccinated. Not all the statistics, not all the scientific infomercials. It was the storytelling. I think that feels scary to me, but I think it should also tell us something as scientists, that if we really want people to hear our message, we have to think about how do we use stories to do that, okay? So storytelling has the power to persuade, compel, and change minds. If you need more evidence, there's actually evidence from psychology. So there's evidence showing that we remember information better if it's told to us in a story. So not only is it more persuasive, like I just showed you in the previous paper, but we remember it and we encode it better. So there's some cool research from psychology showing that if you try to teach people a bunch of facts, like a bunch of facts about physics, about, let's say, all the laws of physics, and some people, you teach it to them in a narrative, like you tell them a story about, Sir Isaac Newton, and, he was out doing this, and then he had this thought, and then he developed this theory, and then he did this experiment, and then it was this theory. They learn it in a narrative versus other people who come in and they just learn the facts. You test them later on to see, well, who remembers those facts, the exact same facts, who remembers them better? It's the people who heard them in a story. There's something kind of special about hearing something in a story. We're more engaged when we hear it. We remember it. We recall it better. Here's another study. It comes out of Princeton that shows the power of storytelling that you can see in our brains. So in this study, what they did is they had people get into fMRI machines. One person, so you'd have kind of partners, buddies. One person would be telling a story and the other person would be listening. So you had a speaker or a storyteller and a listener. And they scanned their brains while this was happening. And what they found was that the speaker, the storyteller, and the listener, their brains got activated in very similar overlapping places. What's more is they found that the amount of overlap, like how much there was overlap in brain activation, could predict how much understanding was happening for the listener. So what does this mean? If you zoom out, it almost seems like there's something special about telling someone a story where you're transferring information into their brain, where you're actually making your brain match their brain in some way. And the more that they're understanding you, the more there's synchrony between your brain and their brain. So there's some kind of neuroscientific evidence for I think brain to brain kind of transference of information through stories. The last little piece of evidence, I don't have like hard evidence, but here's what I typically like to do. I can't see everyone in the room, but I oftentimes ask people to raise their hand if they have in the past week watched a movie. Raise your hand. If you've in the past week watched a Netflix or a streaming service on TV, if you've read a book, if you're one of those people who's like, I don't own a TV and I don't watch movies, but have you read a book? Have you played a video game? Have you gone to the theater? Have you listened to a podcast? All of these, and almost everyone in the room is probably raising their hands, except for maybe one or two weirdos. And that means that most of us are engaging in stories. Everything I just listed out are all stories. Movies, Netflix, Hulu, HBO, documentaries, podcasts, video games, fictional books, even, sometimes non-fictional books as well, theater, all these things are stories. We pay tons of money and we spend, I bet if you mapped out how much time you spend just taking in stories, reading them online or watching them, it would be an obscene amount of time. We love stories. Our brains love stories. Okay, hopefully I've convinced you through some hard data and also just your own anecdotal, like how much time do I spend taking in stories, that storytelling is important. We love it. It actually helps us remember information. It persuades us. It's very engaging. If all of that is true, then as scientists, we should be harnessing the power of storytelling. Okay, instead of being afraid, I think sometimes as scientists, when I was going through grad school, there was a little bit of fear around using stories because we didn't want to manipulate or we didn't want to be too persuasive. We just wanted the data to speak for itself. I think over time now, our PIs and our advisors have seen like, okay, you can use stories in ethical ways to persuade and to convince folks. If we know that storytelling is that powerful, it's almost a disservice to not use it to communicate our findings to the public and to each other. How do we harness storytelling to communicate our science? Well, there's two types of storytelling in science. I like to break it down into two types. There is what I like to call data storytelling. There's also true storytelling. So what are each of these? Well, data storytelling is using components of storytelling. So all stories, no matter what they are, if it's a video game or if it's a movie, they have certain components such as tension or stakes. They tend to have characters. They have a pivotal moment or a climax, and they have a resolution. So they have components that are there. All stories do. We take those components and we put them into how we talk about our research. Like, how do we talk about our research? Having like tension and stakes. How do we talk about our research and have a pivotal moment or a resolution? That's what data storytelling is. True storytelling, on the other hand, is what it sounds like. It's using true stories to engage, persuade, compel, and explain. So, for example, true storytelling in science might be, if I'm talking about I study how infants see the world and understand the world. I might tell you a true story about how I became interested in that, and I might say, oh, I was babysitting this one time and I had this little 6-month-old baby and they were kind of crawling. And then I had this moment where I was like watching them and blah, 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 blah. A true story to help you understand my research question or what I'm interested in or my research or my findings. That's using true storytelling. Everyone in this room has told a true story probably in the last 24 hours. If not in 24 hours, in the past 48 hours, everyone here has. Maybe not about science, but you've probably talked to your partner or your parents or your best friend and you've said, "Hey, I have this really juicy piece of gossip I'm going to tell you about." That's a story. Or if you came home from the lab and you were just frustrated with your advisor, and you're like, my advisor Jan did this thing today and it's like driving me crazy, and you just vented. That's a true story. We're telling stories all the time. That's how we communicate. We're fairly good in general at telling true stories. I think it's really about how do you tell true stories about your science or using that kind of storytelling in your science. What we get less training in as scientists is data storytelling. Okay. So I'm going to spend a good portion of today talking about data storytelling, helping you develop a data story for some of your research. And then we'll also talk about some true stories as well. Okay. All right. So here we go. So data storytelling. Components of a story are, so I've listed 4 components. A problem, every good story has these 4 things. A problem, it has stakes, or what we also call tension, a climax, and a resolution. Let me give you some examples. So, and you can think of any Netflix series that you love, any movie that you love, it's going to have all 4 of these. So for example, one of my favorite Netflix series was the first season of Ozark. I don't know if people have seen it. Um, can I get a show of hands? Can people just like do an emoji? I'm just curious if people have seen it because it might be outdated now. Have people seen Ozark? I see Jocelyn smiling, so I'm like, maybe. Okay. I don't want to spoil it for you, but I think the first episode of Ozark is phenomenal from a storytelling standpoint. And I don't want to spoil it, so I apologize if I'm spoiling it. You should go watch it. But in the first, like, I think 20 minutes, you were totally hooked because the protagonist is all of a sudden thrown into the situation where he sees his friend get shot because, he finds out that he's like working for these drug dealers, and his friend gets shot, and then they're holding a gun to his head and they're saying, "We're going to shoot you and your whole family unless you help us figure out how to launder," I can't remember if it's like $7 million or something. And so you're just like, oh my God, his family's life is on the line. There's a problem. It's that he has to figure out how to launder all this money. The stakes are really high. It's his life, it's his family's life. Also, oh, by the way, you find out he's a really good guy. He's not a bad guy because you kind of think he's like a dirty scumbag, but then you find out, oh my God, he's such a like sweet, loving family guy who just kind of got caught up in this. So then you're just like, the stakes are even higher. You want him to win. On and on and on. I don't want to spoil the rest of it, but there is, and at least in season 1, there is kind of like a climactic moment. Of course, there's not a total resolution because we go into season 2 and even season 3. These same components are in like Star Wars, which I always botch the plot of Star Wars because I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, but I try to bring up Star Wars because it's more of like an iconic story that many of us vaguely know. It has a problem. It has stakes. There's a climax. There's a resolution. So the problem, at least in the first episode that ever came out, the first movie that ever came out, the problem is the evil empire is trying to basically take over the galaxy. And then we have the rebels coming in saying, no, we're going to save it. So there's a problem. What's the stakes? What's at stake here? Well, the whole fate of the galaxy is hanging in the balance. Evil or good, which one's going to win? The climax in that first movie is towards the end of the movie when you're like, who's going to win? Evil or good? And we're fighting back and forth and we do the Darth Vader thing and the laser sword thing. And then they blow up the Death Star and that's the climax. And you're like, yay, they win. And the resolution for that first movie is, okay, good one. At least this time. You got us this time. Okay. I'm just giving you multiple examples of these components playing out in movies. Whatever your favorite book is, think through it and ask yourself, what's the problem? Because there is a problem. And what you'll find is typically a really good book, it's going to tell you what the problem is in the first few pages. Otherwise, you put it down because you're not interested. It's the problem and then the stakes that really hook you. Okay. All right. I've talked your ear off about this. These are the 4 components of a story. But oh my God, how do we put these into our research? Because I've just engaged all of you and talked about Ozark and oh, I love that. I love the first episode. But how do you make your research presentation that interesting? You can do you can put these same components in your research presentation. I'm going to walk you through how to do that. Okay. Okay, so I want you to pull out a piece of paper because I'm going to get you to write a few things down. Okay, go ahead and pull out a piece of paper, or you can do it on your computer if you can toggle back and forth between our screen and your screen. But I'm going to get you to write a few things down. Okay. I first want you to think of an experiment or study that you've conducted. So if you are a grad student, it looked like most of you are beyond at least your first year. So you've probably maybe completed an experiment or study. So think of an experiment or study that you've conducted. Pick one that you like, that you enjoy talking about, or maybe one that you've just finished and that you're trying to find a way to talk about. Okay. For those of you who are like, wait, I'm actually in my first year and I don't have an experiment or study, no problem. You can think of an experiment or study that you often talk about for your research, okay? So it can be someone else's experiment or study, but one that you have to talk about and explain sometimes when you're talking about your own research, okay? So everyone has picked an experiment or a study, okay? Everyone's got one. I want you to shorthand write it at the top of your paper. You know that's what you're going to talk about. In our developmental lab, we often, I mean, I don't know if this is true in all labs, but we have shorthand ways of talking about experiments. So we'd be like, oh, it's the WUG study or it's the elbow study because it had something to do with the procedure or whatever. So whatever the study, you can do your shorthand name for it. That's the study you're going to talk about. That's the experiment you're going to talk about. All right, great. Now, the next thing I want you to do, I want you to ask yourself, no, don't do anything yet. Just kind of sit back and listen for a minute. I want you to ask yourself, what is the one, maybe two big takeaways that I want the public to know about this study? Okay. Now, before you do this, because I say write them down, it says that on the screen, but wait just a moment. Here's what I mean by this. So in any study or experiment, there's usually like 3, 4, 5 different things that we write about or that we talk about, and like all of these things are important. But let's pretend for a moment that you're going to talk to the public. Okay, you're going to talk to the public. You're going to, you have like a press release thing that you have to do, or it's a TED talk, and you can only share one, maybe two big takeaways. And these are the big things that you want someone to walk away knowing about this research or knowing about this study or experiment. Okay, only one or two, no more. Okay. I want you to write them down. Now, before you write them down, a couple of pieces of information. Your audience for this, I've already said it's the general public. I'm going to give you an even more specific audience for this. I want you to think if you have an aunt or an uncle who maybe they went to college, maybe they didn't, but they don't know anything about your field of study. Okay, think of them. I always like to think of my Uncle Ricky. He's my favorite uncle. He didn't go to college. He works as a truck driver. He's pretty smart. And I think about him when I'm trying to think about how do I explain my experiments or studies, because I chat with him and I have to think about, well, how would I explain this to him? Okay. Think of your person, whoever it is you want to think of, your aunt, your uncle, a roommate, someone who's not in your field of study though. Okay. That's your audience for this exercise. You still haven't written anything down yet. I'm still giving you some instructions. Second thing, when you write down your big takeaways, you cannot use jargon. Okay. So I'm going to use Tammy's research. Tammy Spence is here. I'm going to use some of her research as an example. So she's done some cool research for her dissertation where she basically found that people who worried a whole lot, who are very anxious and they worry a lot, they do blink more, Tammy, is that right? They don't blink. They do or don't?
They do blink more.
They do blink more. Okay, sorry, I'm going to say it again. So people who are very anxious and who worry all the time, when they get a really startling thing in their environment, they blink. Whereas people who are less anxious and they worry less, when they hear a really startling thing, they don't blink. Like they almost are like on high alert and they don't blink as much. Interesting. There's all kinds of reasons Tammy thinks that might be the case. That's the big takeaway though. Okay. I said it without using jargon. Tammy and I have talked lots about her dissertation, and she can certainly say it using a lot of jargon, but that's how she says it, not using jargon. Okay, so your audience is that person in your family or your roommate or whoever who's outside of your field of study. You're going to talk to them and you're not going to use jargon. You're going to give them one or two big takeaways from this study. And then finally, you're going to give priority to coherence over resolution. Here's what I mean, and this is important. As scientists, we think every little thing, every little caveat matters. And so when I ask people to give me a big takeaway, I'm going to use Tammy as an example. She might say, okay, people who worry a lot, they blink more, but it's actually only after they see certain words on a screen and we think it's because of this. It's like, okay. But that's a lot. So instead of, you got to zoom really far out and just give me kind of the big picture view. Here's what I mean by coherence over resolution. If you think about looking at a picture or a painting, like you go into the MoMA and you're going to look at a painting, if you want to understand what the big picture is, and it's this huge 20 by 20 painting, where do you stand? Do you stand 1 foot in front of it, or do you zoom out and stand 20 feet back? You stand 20 feet back so you can see the whole thing, right? Now, when you're standing 20 feet back, you're not going to see all the brush strokes. You're not going to see what colors they actually used here to make it look like purple, but it's actually red and a little bit of blue and even some yellow. And like, oh my God, how did they do that? You're not going to see all that. You lose resolution, but you see the big picture. That's what you're going to do here, okay? So I know I've talked your ear off, but you cannot don't use jargon. Aim for coherence over the resolution. Zoom out if you can, okay? And your audience is that person you have in mind, your aunt, your uncle, your roommate, okay? All right, I will stop talking now. I'm going to give you 1 minute to do this. So I want you to take 1 minute, think about your study or your research, and say, what is the one or two big takeaways that I want my Uncle Ricky to know about this experiment, okay? All right, I'll give you 1 minute to do this. I want you to write it down. So you have about 30 more seconds. You're thinking of the one, maybe two big picture takeaways, not using jargon from an experiment or study that you've picked out. Thank you, Tammy. All right, go ahead and pause. All right, great. So hopefully what you each have right now is your takeaway. So the big takeaway. Great. Perfect. The next thing I want you to do, I want you to ask yourself this. What is the question that I'm solving? What's the question that I'm solving? So to give you a little bit of a hint here, it should align with your takeaway. So for example, if your takeaway is people who are really anxious, they they blink whenever they're startled, then the question should be related to that takeaway. So the question might be, are people who worry a lot or who are really anxious, do they do other things with their body that less anxious people don't do? And you could even be specific and say, do people who are anxious, do they, for some reason, when they're startled, do they blink more or do they jump more? I'm curious. The question should be directly aligned with that takeaway, okay? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to write down your question. What is the question that your research is asking? Okay. Align it to the takeaway, especially for those of you who have a really complicated experiment where you typically talk about 5 different things, but I've asked you just to talk about one. So now when I'm asking you for the question, make sure that question aligns to that one takeaway. Okay. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do this. Okay, go ahead and Good thoughts. All right, great. So hopefully what you have is a question and a big picture takeaway. I'm going to have you do something it's going to feel weird and redundant, but I want you on that piece of paper to go over on the side and kind of start in a fresh area. Okay, I want you to or pull out a new piece of paper. If you're in a Word document, hit enter a bunch, go to kind of a fresh, clean area. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to rephrase how you're saying this. So I want you to write at the top of this kind of new, fresh piece of paper, new, fresh area. My question is blah, 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 blah. My question is, do people who worry a lot do things differently physically? Like, are they physically different in how they respond to the world than people who don't worry as much? And then skip some space and write the next phrase. My big takeaway is. Okay, and then write out what your takeaway is. My big takeaway is, yeah, people who worry a lot, they actually blink. They're more likely to blink when something startling happens to them in the environment. Okay, so I'm going to give you 1 minute to do this. Should not be too hard, but we're going to give you 1 minute just in case you didn't quite have enough time to come up with these before. So I'll give you 1 minute to do this. You have about 30 more seconds. Okay, 10 more seconds. Okay, go ahead and pause that. So far on your piece of paper, this kind of new clean area, you have my question is blah, blah, blah. Skip some spaces. My big takeaway or my big takeaways are blah, blah, blah. You haven't used jargon, right? You're talking to your Uncle Ricky. Great. The next thing I want you to do, I want you to answer this question. Who cares? Why does this question matter? Who cares about this question? Make me care. Uh, I want you to put this in a specific place on your piece of paper, though. So put it in between your question and your big takeaway. Okay. And I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do this part because sometimes this is harder. I want you to tell me why it matters. Like, why does it matter if people who worry a lot do things differently, like physically? Who even cares? Like, who cares? So what? So I'll give you 2 minutes to write about that. No jargon. You can write some bullet points if you need, okay? All right, so 2 minutes on the clock. I'll let you go. Okay, you have about 1 more minute left. You can just put some bullet points. Tell me why it matters. Tell Uncle Ricky why it matters. Okay, you have about 10 more seconds. All right, go ahead and wrap up your thoughts for that. So you have on your piece of paper, my question is blank. Why it matters is in the middle, and then my big takeaway is blank. Okay. You could even kind of squeeze in, where you wrote, why it matters. You might have bullet pointed some things. I would even squeeze in above it. It matters because, and then you have all your stuff listed out there. Okay. My question is, uh, do people who worry a lot, who are highly anxious, do they physically do things different than people who worry less? Well, it matters because I'd have to defer to Tammy, but there's all kinds of reasons this might matter. One reason that I've heard Tammy talk about is it's interesting to see or understand if there is a way to easily diagnose people who are highly anxious versus not highly anxious. You go into the doctor's office, they give you a list of questions to try to figure out if you're highly anxious. Oftentimes, a highly anxious person says no to a bunch of stuff, even though maybe they really are highly anxious, and yet they continue to live with all the symptoms of being, very anxiety ridden. What if there was an easier, more objective way to actually diagnose them and to say, no, you are actually highly anxious. We have ways of helping you with that to make your life and the quality of your life better. Tammy then found, yeah, people who are highly anxious, they do something physically different. They blink, they're more likely to blink when they're startled. Wow, you could actually use this as a diagnostic measure in a doctor's office. Can you imagine going into the doctor's office and instead of them giving you a list of questions to see if you're anxious or not, and then you just say no to everything because you don't want to be bothered? What if they gave you a test where they startled you and they measured your eye blink and they said, oh, you're not anxious, or oh, you are. Would you like to talk about options for yourself for treatment? So that's one reason why it would matter. Okay. What have we done so far? Well, remember I started off by saying the components of a story are a problem, stakes, climax, resolution. We talked about Ozark and how much I love it. And then we talked about Star Wars and how little I know about that. And then we just launched into all these questions about your research. But what about these components? Well, I've led you into answering or to filling out some of these components. So when you talk about your question, you're actually telling us what the problem is. It's a problem. So your question is kind of like, here's the problem that I'm trying to ask. It's a research question. It's a research problem. Uh, it matters because you're telling me the stakes. You're telling me why I should care about it, what the stakes are. And then the takeaway is like your resolution. We didn't really go into climax. That's for another time if you want to take another class with us. But I've at least given you 3 of these components: a problem, the stakes, and the resolution. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to say this really quickly. If you're interested, on our websites, we have a website. You can actually get what I'm showing you on the screen. This is a data storytelling toolkit. This will walk you through these 4 different components and how to put them into your research presentations. We didn't have time to talk about climax. If you go to our website, somewhere on the website, you can actually click to download this. You'll have to enter your email address. We'll send it to you, okay? So, okay. Back to this though. The last thing I want you to do, I want you to think if there's a true story that you can use to illustrate one of these. Okay, so we've been using the components of storytelling to create a data story about your research or this experiment. Now, what about that true storytelling aspect? Well, I want you to think through, is there a true story that I could maybe tell to illustrate potentially the question or why it matters? I'm going to use Tammy's research again. I'm like stealing her thunder. If you ever take a class with Tammy, she'll talk about her research and she does it in very compelling ways. So a true story, Tammy might say, can I share this, Tammy? So Tammy has talked about her research and she says, she got interested in her research, years ago in college. She went in for a pap smear at the doctor's office. And when she went in, they did that thing. I don't know if this has ever happened to you when you go into the doctor's office and they show you a list of questions and they're like questions that ask you like, how do you feel when this happens? And do you ever worry about this? And do you ever worry about this? And Tammy's like, yes, yes, yes. And then her doctor comes in and she's there for a pap smear, but her doctor's like, I think you're like extremely anxious and we might want to like seek treatment options. And Tammy was like, no, thank you. And she lived like the next 10 to 15 years of her life just as a highly anxious person until it became so debilitating in some instances that she finally had to be like, I think I need to do something about this. And she actually ultimately went into research, studying this very same problem. So the true story I just told you, that is Tammy's true story about her own research. Do you have a true story that might illustrate why this kind of question matters? I mean, that true story is kind of why it matters. Because imagine if Tammy had gone into the doctor's office and they were like, "Here, do this eye blink test," and they're like, "Oh, okay, you're anxious. We're actually going to give you some treatment options," instead of this kind of back and forth negotiating of like a self-report survey. Okay, do you have a true story? I'm going to give you about a minute to think of this. You don't have to write out the whole true story. Just ask yourself, like, do I have a true story? Like, why am I interested in this? It could be something about like, why am I interested in this topic of study? Did something happen that was a true thing that happened in my life that made me interested? Maybe I was sitting in a class and we talked about it in class and I was like, oh my God, I love it. Or maybe I saw something happen in the world and that sparked my interest, or a reason why it might matter if you have a story about that. I'll shut up so that you can think about it. Just jot down a couple of points so you'll remember the true story, okay? So I'll give you 1 minute to do that. Okay, so go ahead and pause there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute so I can look at everyone. How are people feeling so far? You can write it in the chat if you feel comfortable turning your video on. You can do that. That'd be wonderful. You can speak up or you can write in the chat. How did this feel to do? Was this easy, hard?
It was easy.
It was
Easy.
easy.
hmm
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Is it Lois? Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. Fantastic. And was it easy because you've thought about this before? Or can you share a little more?
Um, it was easy because of how like you broke it down. And I have thought about it before, so that helped as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
hmm
Anyone else? It's also okay if someone's like, it was hard and here's why. That's okay too. How did this feel? Or any observations from folks?
Hi, yeah. This is Karina. Yeah, I found the hardest part to be the why this matters, and especially translating that to like, plain English for a, reasonably intelligent aunt or uncle. I found
Yeah.
that to be really hard to just describe like why does this matter? Of
Yeah. And can I ask a few follow-up questions, Karina?
course.
What's your research on? Can I ask? Or the experiment that you were talking about?
So, and I study face recognition, and particularly among experts who like
Mm.
go into court and provide testimony. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I study the specific experiment that I have been working through in this workshop is which parts of the face might be better for making identification decisions. I should use my own language that I used here in plain English. Are there certain parts of a face that professionals should use when identifying people for criminal investigations?
Yeah. I
That's
can Fantastic, Karina. I can think of reasons why that matters. Like, yes, I don't want to spoil it for you, but like when you said that, I'm like, oh my God, I can think of lots of reasons why that might matter. But
yeah.
I was just curious if because my research is like super basic and it's like with infants and like we eye track them and I think especially the more basic your research is, the harder it is to figure out like why it matters or to say it in a way that makes sense. Fantastic. Don't tell us yet why it matters because I'm gonna get you to pair up with someone else in a moment and tell them. Okay. Fantastic. Did other people have issues with that as well? It looks like some of the people in the chat, Antonia said, yes, I found that that was the hardest part too. Yes. And Marta also said the same thing. Yes, that is hard. So here's the thing, Tammy and I do other workshops with similar, we talk about data storytelling and, elevator pitches and how do you explain the so what of your research? Because that's huge. You need to know the so what, and you need to know the so what for different audiences. So the who cares is going to be different for, if you're talking to someone in your field or, tangential to your field, another scientist, versus if you're talking to Uncle Ricky. Why they should care is going to differ. So you have to be able to think at different levels about why your research is actually contributing to, solving a problem in the world or why it should matter. And that is hard. So it's not just a one shot, like I'm done, like I figured it out, here's this one thing. Because like I said, it's going to differ depending on who you're talking to. Okay. That is a hard part. Yes. Um, any other observations before we do the next thing? Okay, here's what we're going to do now. Don't freak out, but we're going to put you in groups of two again. Don't leave though. If you're me, I'm the person who the moment they say we're going to go into breakout rooms, I'm like, no, and I leave. Don't leave. I think you'll enjoy this part. We're going to put you into pairs with each other, and you're each going to share a little bit of your research. So the way that Karina, shared, it was funny because Karina started out doing it like the jargony, and then she's like, wait a minute, let me just say it the way I wrote it down. Share your research without jargon. Try to work through like, here's why it matters. And if there's a true story to go along with it, share that. And each of you should be able to do it. So give each other 3 minutes, about 3 minutes each. We're going to put you in the breakout rooms for 6 to 7 minutes, and then we'll come back in here. Okay. So this should be fun. Don't freak out or leave. If you go into your room and neither one of you want to share, it's okay. Talk about something else then. But I encourage you to go in and try to share your research. Okay. Tammy, are we able to pair people up?
We are. There's one room that will have 3 people.
Great. No problem.
Okay.
All right. So we'll see y'all in, let's do 7.5 minutes so that so kind of keep track of the time, folks, so that everyone gets to share. Okay. Okay. So everyone just went into breakout rooms. This is for our recording. Everyone went into breakout rooms and shared a little bit. And then we had a few people who actually shared about their research in our larger main room. It was very cool, very exciting to hear about people's research. Okay. Keep going. True story. Okay. So everyone in here today, you have created a data story. So you came up with the question that you were asking. You told us which is the problem. You told us why it matters, which is the stakes. And then you gave us a key message or the resolution. Now, there are other ways that you can put in a pivotal moment or a climax. And again, if you sign up for the toolkit, we walk you through how to find a pivotal moment. And you all did this today potentially using a true story to help illustrate, right? I want you to also, as you leave here today, think about how it felt to listen to your partner or to listen to other people in the main room. What were the parts that felt really interesting? I can tell you for me, I really was like, oh, when Antonia was saying, you know what I hate? I hate when I'm like talking to someone and they look at their phone. The reason I like that, because I'm like, I get it. Like I feel that way too. So think about when you were hearing other people share, what were the parts that you were like, oh, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to walk away and remember that thing. And then ask yourself, what can I learn about how I present from that? Or if you were in your pairs and that your partner said something and you're like, I'm going to always remember that. I'm always going to take that with me. Why are you always going to take that with you? And what can you learn about how to talk about research from that point? Okay. If it's the fact that if one thing you're going to remember when you walk out of here is the pap smear thing, why am I remembering Tammy's pap smear? And then Tammy's like, stop talking about my pap smear. Well, it's because it's almost like taboo to even say, and you're like, oh, it stands out in my mind. Oh, interesting. What can you learn from that in terms of how you might share your research? Maybe you give someone, maybe not a taboo thing, but you say a very kind of shocking piece of information and then follow up inside your true story. And that might be a memorable way that you can get people to remember what you do, why you do it. Okay. Okay. Closing thoughts. So our brains love stories. We remember this is where we came from all over the session today. We talked about research that shows how we remember things better when it's told to us in a story. We're more persuaded by things that are told in a story. People's brains seem to like synchronize when they're hearing a story and telling a story. We love stories. So we should be using storytelling to communicate our science. Two different ways we can do that is through data storytelling. We talked about what that is. True storytelling, you know what that is. We should be doing this for the public, but also for one another. So oftentimes we work with scientists who are like, I want to talk to the public better and to do a better job, communicating with Uncle Ricky. But then the moment they walk into their lab meeting, oh my God, it's all the jargon again. And it's hard to get the jargon to go away. And we talk about theories as opposed to maybe real observations and real stories. I think if we used storytelling to talk to each other, it would actually change how we do our science in positive ways. We'd probably be more innovative if we talk to each other using stories as well. So think about that, using storytelling with one another as well. Okay, that is all we have. A couple of things on the screen. If you want to go to our website, the QR code in the lower left-hand corner, that is our website. We offer workshops periodically. I think we're going to offer a couple of workshops this year that are public workshops. We also run private workshops for institutes and lab groups. If you're interested in that, you can email us. My email address is right there, lisa@storiesofscience.org. We also have a general inbox right there. If you follow us on Instagram, there is our Instagram. And then finally, if you want to get on our mailing list, you can fill out that thing that says interest form. Essentially, what that will do is it puts you on our newsletter so that when we have workshops, like we have data storytelling workshops, elevator pitch workshops, podcasting workshops, you'll get updates about that. Okay. I'll leave it for a second so people can do the QR code if they want, and then I'm going to stop sharing. All right. Thank y'all so much. I'm going to hand it back to Jocelyn. Thank y'all so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much again for everyone being here and staying all the way to the end. Thank you, Lisa and Tammy, for a wonderful conversation walking us through this. I think what is the hardest in communicating science, and it's prepping for it and finding the time and having this structure of, okay, I have a minute to think about this and figured it out. So thank you so much for giving us that space and giving us a walkthrough and pretty much holding our hands through like how to create a story. So thank you again, and thank you everyone. We do have more workshops coming up this summer, so feel free to join. But thank you again, and visit our site. I'm going to be sending you the link to this recording via email. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Thank y'all.
Bye.
Thank you.